I understand that Savitri is a work of Sri Aurobindo that is intended to achieve something that philosophy cannot achieve, and also that the human being alone cannot achieve. In Vedic tradition, the mantra is necessary to connect the higher mind with the overmind, so that there can be a direct transmission from that plane of consciousness. And that transmission is an energetic transmission. It raises the vibrational structure of human consciousness. And this has been practiced in Vedic tradition forever. And the first thing that you read from Sri Aurobindo in several of his books is the word Shruti. Shruti, he says, is the basis of his teaching. And Shruti is something that we hear. But it's not the words and the sound and the understanding that we hear. It is a truth of consciousness and being that is revealed to us by that speech. Shruti is a seeing, hearing, knowing, which is not coming from the mind. And it's in Indian philosophy, it's always present. They have always spoken about Shruti. They speak about perception and reasoning and imagination and all of the standard mental faculties, and then they speak about Shruti. And it's different. So Sri Aurobindo understood that from the beginning, and he frequently writes about it. When we read about it, you know, he's not making a big campaign. He just mentions it a few times in every book. That what he is communicating is Shruti. It is not philosophy. But the human mind wants to read philosophy because it's used to it. It has it realizes some meaning in the logical, discursive type of thinking. We're very habituated to that, especially since 1800. And also to see it with the eyes and not to hear it. We read, and we make mental associations based on the concepts that we read. And that's not what Sri Aurobindo is doing, actually. He's doing something different. And when it comes to Savitri, it is more different. Because Savitri fits into a category known as mantra. And mantra is the Shruti expressed perfectly as sound transmission of the Shruti consciousness, the intuitive overmind seeing is transmitted by the mantra. So it makes it possible to see something immediate. And that immediate seeing is the purpose of Savitri. And so it makes no difference to have 49 cantos. It could be 4 cantos or 9 cantos. It makes no difference. And the connection between the cantos has no importance at all. So I'll demonstrate that. I'll read some sections from the beginning, from the middle, and from the end, and we will see and we will hear exactly the same thing. So the mind should not fool itself by thinking that if you read Savitri from the beginning to the end, you may know the difference between the beginning and the end, and it will be important. Because it's a book. It looks like a book. It quacks like a duck, but it's not a book or a duck. And it's a collection of mantras. So if we think about what we heard on Thursday night about consciousness, we can come, I believe, to the understanding that what the Western philosophers were speaking about in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, they were speaking about a certain level of consciousness. The intellectual mind level, which is based upon sensation and perception and reflection. So this is all that Hume and Kant are talking about. They are describing the functioning of the mental consciousness, not consciousness in general. So there's practical mind, there's vital mind, there's physical mind, there's intellectual mind, higher mind, and there is the overmind intuition, which is a completely different consciousness, level of consciousness. So this is the first thing that we can begin to learn about that question, what is consciousness? It is awareness, but it is awareness of many different kinds on many different levels. And another thing that was mentioned on Thursday night is that the early philosophers, the early Greeks and the early Indians in the 5th century BCE, they were thinking about happiness, about liberation from falsehood and illusion. The Greeks were thinking about it, and the Indians were thinking about it. And Puro from Greece went to India and with Alexander the Great and meditated with the Buddhists and spent some years in India, and then he went back to Greece and he taught this epoche. Epoche means suspending judgment. And the teaching was about all the things which the mind cannot know or knows incorrectly. And if we suspend judgment about all of those things that the mind doesn't understand very well because it's limited, then we can enter into a state of calm and peace and luminosity, ataraxia, imperturbable delight. The same teaching is in Buddhism and Hinduism. The negation of the lower mind brings liberation from the ego mind. What Hume and Kant are talking about all the time, very explicitly and perfectly, is what Patanjali calls the ego mind, antakarana. So this is what Western philosophy has been examining very thoroughly for many, many centuries. But the early philosophers in both Greece and India were thinking about liberation from that lower mind. Plato was thinking about it, and the Stoics were thinking about it. And this thinking went from about 500 BCE until about 500 CE, after Augustine. And then the rational mind came back strong. So the canto that I'm going to read now is about that ataraxia, about that imperturbable calm, liberated from the ego mind. And it's not about that. It is a transmission of that. For a moment, we can experience exactly that.